Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 167 with Justin Singh. So I am recording this intro very quickly as I am attending the UPSI Mid-Atlantic Conference. Still wanted to get this episode out to you all, so I'll certainly share my thoughts about the conference after, but please do enjoy this conversation all about McGraw Hill's recent study about student study habits and their awesome new tool, the Sharpen study tool that students can utilize to better optimize their study time. So check it all out in the show notes to connect with Justin and McGraw Hill to keep up with what they're doing. And thank you so much for listening to this episode number 167 with Justin Singh.
I'm very excited to have our conversation here today, be focusing on a recently released report from McGraw Hill focusing on study habits of today's college students, which is just another facet of these kind of just tumultuous past couple of years where there's so much accelerated change. And this is one really important aspect that I'm just very grateful to be able to focus on. So as usual, though, we will have our guests introduce themselves and give a brief overview of their professional background and how they got to be where they are today.
Justin, I'm thrilled to be here today and to discuss some of the trends that we are seeing in the higher ed space, particularly with our students. And so thank you for your invitation to come on your podcast. My name is Justin Singh. I'm enormously grateful to have a global perspective on education. Indian heritage, Australian upbringing, lived almost a decade in the US and have benefited from a professional life that has thus been international. I grew up in education and spent my nights and weekends at the University of Melbourne, being son of two professors that worked together and shared the same laboratory together. And growing up, I was at awe on the value that our higher institution brings to society, and traveling the world to visit different universities. And those who are sons and daughters of professors will know carrying posters, back in the day, mini carousel slide projectors, and being taught by a lot of PhD students that taught me how to play basketball and what have you. When I started my career, Dustin, I started in strategy consulting, and I found myself gravitating towards those projects that were near and dear to my heart in education, where I could work with instructors and administrators that were striving to deliver fantastic education, keep the doors open, conduct research as well. And it really provided empathy in the space around the driving force that our sector provides. And particularly when working with vocational institutions, research universities, and governments in the US and in Australia. Now at McGraw Hill, I feel privileged to work at a company that focuses on empowering instructors, institutions, and learners to provide high-quality, accessible education. And we do that, Dustin, by focusing on using technology platforms to deliver our engaging, trusted content to create learning experiences in an increasingly digitally connected world, which I'm sure we'll talk through in the rest of our conversation today.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you for sharing your whole kind of origin story there. And yeah, you are kind of at the top levels of McGraw Hill, and like I said, kind of having that kind of global perspective on education. So, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the name, and I think certainly I think the focus has evolved of what McGraw Hill does now. But if you want to explain really quickly for folks who may not be fully aware of kind of the scope of what McGraw Hill is up to these days, if you want to just share what you all are up to there, kind of just more generally.
Justin, you're right. We have a proud history in education. In fact, we've been in education for over 130 years. And we're in a special position where we operate across the entire life cycle of a learner, right from kinder all the way to their professional lives. And what that means is when you think about where we operate, starting on our K-12 presence, we're in we help nearly every district in the US and number of education systems globally. Really at the center of the classroom, with using our digital products such as our open learning platforms to help teachers undertake their core curriculum and their supplemental and intervention solutions. We also, in higher education, we are one of the largest courseware providers in the United States, and what we focus on there is assisting institutions and instructors deliver hybrid, engaging learning in the classroom. And of course, we have a growing professional presence that's really focused on healthcare and medical education. And we are able to work now in over 133 countries across the world. And our business continues to rapidly change. If you look at our higher education business, it's predominant, and really all our businesses are now predominantly digital, and highly so in higher education as well.
Yeah, and I feel like we're kind of having this conversation. I feel like, as I often do, kind of like start very macro and start to zoom in and in more and more. And yeah, I mean, that evolution of digital content delivery, shaping how students learn in higher education, in particular, is kind of where we're going to start zooming in a little bit more. And like I said, like students' study habits, how they're sort of accessing and utilizing that content, but from your perspective, obviously it's a unique one with that kind of global perspective on education. When it comes to higher ed, like what do you see as some of the major forces shaping kind of the hybridization of education right now? Because I do think that takes a lot of different shapes. So I'm just kind of going to leave that big question, as it is. Take it as you will.
We here at McGraw Hill, we do take that global ecosystem viewpoint. And you mentioned at the start just what a rapid change in recent couple of years have been in the world, but also in education. And so we see the trends really starting from that K-12 side, and we've seen over 1.5 billion students impacted by school closures. And we've also seen just the 4 to 5 months of learning loss that students experience in the US. And I bring that up, Justin, because that will have flow-on effects in the higher education industry. And overall, we've never seen in the K-12 side more the impact and the importance of the teacher in the classroom and being able to empower the teacher in the classroom deliver those learning experiences. And that's very similar when we think about higher education. And there's never been a need for students, and students are looking to upskill, looking to attain a job, get the learning that they need to be successful. But they're navigating this new world, and so are faculty as well, as they look to deliver those fantastic experiences in that ever-changing hybrid learning classroom that is evolving across all the sectors that we see and we look at. And that is the one, when we look across all the sectors, including professional, one of the underlying changes that we're seeing, that digital transformation in our institutions, but we see it rapidly increasing. And that will only just continue as we look in the next couple of years, not only in K-12, but higher education as well.
Yeah, I mean, that learning loss is kind of that, I don't know, like the best, I love metaphors. So it's almost kind of like, kind of an undercurrent thing. I can't think of like a good colorful metaphor, but it's like something that's sort of like, maybe not as like apparent sort of tangibly on a day-to-day basis, but like you said, I think it, is going to be this sort of ripple for everybody that was in any education setting over these past 2 years. It's going to show up, for them throughout their educational career, and just the way that we build kind of proper supports, or how students are kind of building their study skills and everything, is so important. So so it's just going to be really interesting, because I think maybe it's because like we haven't really been able to like quantify, like I guess like you have that like quantifying like this much learning loss, but then it's like that idea of like, and that means like it's going to be like this for years and years and years, like really kind of get our arms around, I guess, like the scale of like how how many students and for how long we're going to be kind of grappling with this, you know?
It's such a good point, Dustin. And what's ultimately most important is that we are able to meet students where they're at and deliver learning in the way that helps them stay engaged and focused. And in fact, Dustin, the way students, if we hone in on higher ed, as you were saying, taking the macro view and now going towards higher ed, we've seen the way that students are studying are changing as well. Even pre-pandemic, we're constantly, listening to millions of students that we serve and hundreds of students, every month. And pre-pandemic, we were seeing changes in their study behaviors, moving, supplementing what they were learning in the classroom with different types of tools, also taking more self-directed learning approaches. So, the approaches that help them stay motivated, help them address that feeling of lack of time or being intimidated by their studies. And then, of course, Dustin, to your point, the pandemic came and just accelerated shifts in the way students were studying. In fact, as we did a survey with Morning Consult, and what we found was that 74% of students have changed the way that they've studied in the recent years. And in fact, a number of them are increasingly telling us that when they sit down to study, they overwhelmingly regularly feel stressed. They regularly feel that they feel tired. They don't feel like they're in the mood to study. And that overarching feeling of intimidation. And we are seeing students increasingly look to other forms of media to consume learning content. So we also learned that 78% of students are regularly going to social media to engage and consume content. In fact, Dustin, 19% are spending over 6 hours per week searching and looking for content. And of course, there's nothing wrong with doing that. We all are consuming content in different ways, whether we're making FaceTime calls, we're looking at our metrics on our phone. At the same time, however, students know, and we innately knew, in fact, 88% of students know that they can't entirely trust the platforms that they're increasingly going to. And in fact, faculty see that as well. And they see that, there's that gap between the way that students are increasingly looking for supplemental resources to enrich their higher education experiences. However, with that trusted content they're looking to find.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think like this conversation makes me think of two things. Like one where like, in the absence, kind of like in a vacuum, we like desperately seek to fill it. So like if we don't have what we think we need or want like available, then we'll, just seek it out somewhere. And, having that very self-directed learning experience. And especially over these past 2 years where like we were all dealing with a global pandemic and had a lot of stress and other, demands on our time and energy and everything. So it just would be tough for instructors and stuff to be able to maybe give as much attention or, have TAs be as available or something. But then like the idea of, growing up with YouTube and now certainly like TikTok, where there is just such an abundance of content and they're spending a lot of time on there and looking for answers there, with then spending so much time searching for information. Like, I think it is such a like abundant resource, but it's likely not very efficiently kind of categorized, easily searchable. So it's just like somewhat of a inefficient way. And with everything that's going on, normally for any learner nowadays, it's like I've just always found that time is the enemy. Like they have very little time, so we need to optimize that time that they do have in order for them to be, as successful as possible with their studies.
Exactly. We hear from students. We hear from students that they want to be successful, they feel time poor, and they're multitaskers. And we hear loud and clear from students. They might be going into a Zoom lecture that typically is an hour long, or they've gone into classroom and they leave that classroom. And we've all been there, right? We're walking out of that classroom, and now, as you mentioned, we have that abundance of information at our fingertips, and that's where they're starting to look at tools such as TikTok and looking for information in such platforms, or having that feeling, right, when you sit down on your desk. And we heard time and time and time from students, the hardest part of studying is just getting started. The feeling that you're opening hundreds of tabs on your browser, just being lost for hours, and then finding content that may or may not be relevant to your studies, and ultimately is not an efficient use of time for the student, and also for their experience, as they need to transverse what is a experience for them, not only for learning what's in their class, but also the experience that they get through higher education.
Right. Well, and like, yeah, just like that emotional piece of it, like you're saying, like the frustration, the, just kind of like a lack of confidence, or, yeah, just like getting started. Like, yeah, it's not encouraging when it's like, I know that I'm going to be having to like climb a mountain just to like find what I need to even like, maybe get started. So,
And
yeah,
now,
really important issue. Yeah.
and now, Dustin, some students that we talk to, they haven't met number of their instructors in person, particularly during that pandemic period. And so you can imagine, if you're that student sitting in the chair, how reserved you may feel to ask that question, to go into that office hours at that particular point in time when you're trying to juggle your work life, your newfound social life, and increasingly your home life, because you're at home as well. And so the need for us as an industry to provide, to enrich and augment the studying experiences to solutions has never been greater.
Yeah, agreed. So I know, through the work that you're doing, like you're examining this issue, but also I think, doing your part, doing the work to try to provide solutions. So I think just like broadly, what do you see as sort of like potential solutions to optimizing kind of student study habits?
Justin, it's one area at McGraw Hill we've been thinking long and hard, even before the pandemic hit us, and as I mentioned, just only been accelerating those particular trends. And we at McGraw Hill have responded with a first of its kind mobile platform called Sharpen. And Sharpen is designed to help our students stay engaged and focus on what matters, and take control of their learning. And ultimately, Dustin, we hear students explain Sharpen in many different ways to us as we undertake. For the last year, all our user research. Some students have said it's like if their textbook and and TikTok had a baby. It's like motivating like Duolingo, or it's like Apple Fitness. And ultimately, I'm really happy to share Sharpen today with you, Dustin. I think about it as, when I came to the US, the only thing that I brought with me was my road bike. And for those who've been in Zoom calls with me, they know it's always on always behind me. And I love riding my bike, and I love exercising, and it's something that I'll always do. However, technology has helped enrich my experience. I now use apps like Strava to help me motivate me, provide analytics and information while I go on my ride, and connect me with information that I need to make my riding more engaging. And that's ultimately what we're seeking to do. Not changing studying, but make that studying experience more enriching, engaging, and focused. And so we're able to deliver a solution that students can go to, where they can get that trusted content just in an engaging manner, and help in faculty who know that their students are going to these supplemental resources like TikTok, like Facebook for information, but may not be able to trust them, or may not be able to trust that. Now faculty have a place where they can potentially recommend students go to find that complementary learning resource to their assigned material.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the idea of like that students generally, however old they are just expecting, I think, like a user experience that, uh, you know, as somewhere in the neighborhood of like what they're experiencing elsewhere on, like optimized for the mobile devices, like just sort of intuitive and all of that. So I think, yeah, like all efforts in that direction are time well spent. And I think, it's that piece and, something that I've always been an advocate for is like trying to make things like on-demand tutoring more available, or like being more accessible for like, virtual office hours, or, just communicating via different modalities and everything. Because it is just sort of, you know, being as available as possible, and, meeting the students wherever they are, versus kind of assuming maybe that they're only in one place or another, or, you come to me, I'll be here if you need me kind of thing. It's like kind of keeping all doors and windows and everything kind of open to, like you said, kind of having that faculty involvement, which is so valuable. And then, kind of supplementing, often this one person trying to work with like several students, with as many other sort of support structures and things to kind of, perhaps kind of like have things be resolved before a student even needs to go to the faculty if it's sort of like a very low level question, or,
Right.
Again, if everything's just more user friendly, then, students aren't either wasting their time looking elsewhere, or having to kind of, if they even feel comfortable enough to do it in the first place, asking too many questions or kind of the same question over and over again to their faculty member.
Justin, we learned so much as we were not only researching in the creation of Sharpen, but also listening to our students and understand their feedback. And we learned that 3 and 4 students would say that they would supplement and study their course materials more if it matched the style and convenience of the resources that they access via these other channels. And ultimately, the student method of absorbing and engaging material isn't wrong. There's a brilliance in a way that students are absorbing and engaging material. The problem is that they're searching and finding misinformation. And so for us, it was, at McGraw Hill, which we concentrated on creating that high quality content, we worked tirelessly to find a way to deliver that content in a way that is conducive into the way that students learn today. And so, Dustin, a lot of the things that you see in Sharpen is straight away that continuous feed of study content that's broken down, with videos broken down into 5-minute chunks that explains what the students need to know to understand their materials, with swipeable study tools and gamified quizzes. Ultimately, Dustin, the way we did that was, using that learning data that we had, billions of learning data that we had, and we could see where instructors were assigning particular, what we call learning objectives. So particular parts of the content that they were trying to ensure that students were succeeding in, and where students were struggling. So we could see that. And what we're able to do through working with our students is to deliver that in a bite-sized format that meets them where they are and ultimately provides an engaging experience. So within 20 minutes, they can feel confident in learning a particular part or a particular chapter that they need to understand in the title that they're learning.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think that, anymore is just embodying like good instructional design principles, and if it's like, okay, like you do your part, like building out the course in your LMS, and then like, know that we are, creating the content in a format and delivery, platform that just embodies best practices and everything. So like, bringing that into any course that a institution is sort of propping up in their LMS, it just sort of, almost kind of superpowers it or something, like they don't have to kind of figure out how to maybe do all that stuff themselves. So I think that is that is pretty great to hear. Just knowing, like, that, yeah, it's just good, instruction design imbued into that. So, um, and I guess to just kind of like put like a bow on this as well. Like, I think we've kind of mentioned it in passing a bit, but like, you know, especially for today's learners or increasingly adult learners, they're balancing a work life, home life, and everything. Why do you think this topic is so important for student success? Like, sure, yeah, I mean, somebody who'd be like, okay, cool, they're going to save a couple hours a week studying or something, like, big deal. And it's like, no, I think it's a pretty big deal, especially for the students who are coming into higher education who are looking to get, more value out of their experience and kind of uplift their life and everything. So I guess, yeah, just what's your kind of perspective on like why this topic is so important?
It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal, Dustin. At the end of the day, students want to be successful in their learning, and in whatever their goals are that they're trying to achieve. Faculty and institutions want to provide a fantastic learning experience. Dustin, your podcast and the people that you have on your podcast is a real testament to that, and that desire and purpose in our ecosystem and the special industry that we work in, to jointly deliver student success. And we see innovation all around in higher education institutions and faculty as well, in the way they really have one pivot foot in that real core mission in terms of providing learning, but seeking to provide different ways that are meeting students where they are today. Because ultimately, with our students succeeding in achieving their goals, we have students that are able to go out and contribute to our society, and also have a vibrant higher education industry that has been so for many years, and for the next 10 years and decades moving forward. So an incredibly important area. We all know the challenges that are facing our industry, whether it's retention rates in the industry, whether it's students that are opting to stay out, both of higher education, or potentially even the workforce itself. And so the ability for us to help them learn, provide them relevant and trusted learning experiences, is what's going to really help define the next couple of years and success of our sector moving forward.
Yeah, I love it. Through all this work, I'm sure there's maybe a lot that was contributing to your perspective on this issue and to the best strategies, to confront it and everything. But yeah, we always just like to give a moment if you have any resources that you'd like to share, your own or others, that we can include in the show notes.
Yeah, we here at McGraw, we increasingly have that and believe there's a lot to learn from other industries around us as well. And so a podcast and a newsletter that I enjoy reading is Ben Thompson's newsletter called Strategically. I've been reading that for a number of years, and really interesting in terms of seeing how ways content and the way it's been delivered has been changing in different industries, whether that is social media, whether that's gaming, alike, and now increasingly education. So fantastic resource to check out, and he also has a podcast that folks can listen to as well.
Perfect. Yeah, I always love something a little outside of education, but there are often many examples like that that have very applicable, leadership lessons and things to learn. So, yeah, we'll include that for folks to check out, as well as everything that we've talked about in this episode as usual. But so we will end as we always do, though. Just give you the floor. You've already shared so many great insights, but please do share any final thought or call to action that you might have to end the episode with.
Justin, there's never been a more vibrant time to be in higher education. I've never felt more excited, and very much so because we've never had We've never had the tools at our disposal to enrich what has always happened in our institutions, and that's delivering high quality learning. And so as we look over the next couple of years, we are just so excited to see and to be part of that overall sector transformation journey. Sharpen that we discussed today is just one example, but there are so many examples of innovation going on in our sector. And that's just a real big takeaway that I think gets lost in a lot of the media that's happening around education today.
Yes, I share your optimism and the value of everything kind of contributing, doing its part to help better the experience of students. And so I think, it is a good time. I think there's so much potential, and we'll have some headwinds for a while, but I think, our fortitude to get through them and make sure that students are still getting the experiences they want out of higher education. Yeah, it's just, it's good on us. And I appreciate being able to be a part of this whole sort of experience in my own way. And just appreciate you for doing the work as well and sharing all about what you're working on there at McGraw Hill. So again, we'll have ways to connect with Justin and all that he mentioned in the show notes. But just thank you for your time. Thank you for all you shared. And just really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you for having me on today.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.